I knew the exact moment my career at Matthews Steel and Fabrication was dead on the table. It wasn't when the quarterly projections dipped, and it wasn't when my late wife Jennifer's portrait was moved from the lobby to the break room hallway next to the fire extinguisher. No, the death certificate was signed the second Ryan walked into the boardroom wearing sneakers that cost more than our welders make in a month, clapping his hands like he was summoning servants at a tech conference he didn't pay for. My name is Chris Matthews. I'm 47 years old, and I've been running the operations division at this steel fabrication company for 15 years. I know where every bolt is stored because I'm the one who designed the inventory system. Jennifer and I built this place from the ground up after I left the Army, and she passed away 3 years ago from cancer. If you're enjoying this train wreck of corporate arrogance and want to see a spoiled 31-year-old get absolutely demolished by fine print, go ahead and hit subscribe and drop a like. Anyway, back to the massacre. Ryan, my lovely stepson and newly appointed chief executive officer, didn't look at me. He looked through me, busy projecting a slide deck that was 90% stock photos of diverse people in hard hats and 10% actual data, which happened to be wrong. He was talking about pivoting to a tech-first manufacturing paradigm. We fabricate steel beams and industrial machinery, Ryan. We don't need an app. We need welders who don't fail drug tests and equipment that actually works. The legacy infrastructure, Ryan said, his eyes finally landing on me like a predator spotting wounded prey, is holding us back. We have too many redundancies in the back office. Too much dead weight. The room went quiet. The other department heads, men I had hired and trained, men I had bailed out of safety violations more times than I could count, stared at their notepads. Cowards. They knew legacy infrastructure was code for Chris. They knew dead weight meant the man who actually read the safety regulations before signing off on projects. I didn't flinch. I just took a slow sip of that terrible conference room coffee. Interesting perspective, Ryan, I said, my voice level. Considering the legacy infrastructure just saved us $1.2 million in EPA fines last quarter because I caught a clause in the waste disposal vendor's renewal agreement that would have made us liable for their negligence. But please, tell me more about the app. Ryan's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. It was that terrifying tech bro frozen glare that suggests the person behind it has never heard the word no without immediately calling their daddy or a lawyer. We appreciate the history, Chris, truly, but Mom is gone, and this company needs to evolve. We'll be scheduling one-on-ones to discuss future alignments. I think you and I need a special block of time. Alignment. That's corporate speak for get your box ready. I felt a cold knot in my stomach, not of fear, but of a deep, simmering rage. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the erasure. I wasn't just Jennifer's widower. I was the one who stayed late when she was sick. I was the one who negotiated the merger with the private equity vultures 3 years ago, when cash flow was so tight we were paying vendors in promises. I was the one who kept the lights on while Ryan was busy curating his LinkedIn feed to look like a working executive, despite having 2 assistants and a personal trainer on company time. The meeting dragged on for another hour of buzzword bingo, holistic approach, drill down, low-hanging fruit. I stopped listening and started observing. I watched the way the CFO, Matt Davis, wouldn't make eye contact with me. I watched the way the HR director, spineless woman named Heather Collins, was furiously typing on her phone under the table. They were all in on it. This wasn't a consultation, it was a coronation, and I was the old regime waiting for the guillotine. When the meeting adjourned, Ryan made a point of stopping by my chair. He smelled like expensive cologne and unearned confidence. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look supportive but felt like he was checking for a pulse so he could call the coroner. "I know this is hard, Chris," he whispered loud enough for the lingering executives to hear. "Change is scary at your age, but we have to think about the shareholders. We have to trim the fat." Trim the fat. I stood up, straightening my tie. I am 47 years old. I run 4 miles every morning, have a mind like a steel trap, and a tolerance for nonsense that was currently redlining. "I agree, Ryan," I said, offering him a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a mirror image of his own plastic pleasantry. "The shareholders deserve value. Efficiency is key. I look forward to our chat." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, the sound of his designer sneakers squeaking behind me like a countdown clock. He thought he was hunting me. He thought I was just the grieving widower holding onto a ghost job. He didn't know that I wasn't just an employee. I was the architect of the very foundation he was standing on. And he had no idea that I had installed a trapdoor. I went back to my office, the corner office that used to be Jennifer's when she ran the company, the one Ryan had already instructed maintenance to measure for structural updates, and I closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I sat down at my desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a single red folder. Inside wasn't a resume. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It was a document I had drafted 2 years ago during the COVID panic when the board was terrified of hostile takeovers and begged me to secure the loyalty of the executive team. They had signed everything I put in front of them without reading it, too busy hyperventilating about stock prices and supply chain disruptions. I opened the folder to page 12. The paragraph was short, boring really, just legal text in 11-point Times New Roman. But to me it looked like poetry. It looked like a loaded gun. Ryan wanted to trim the fat. He wanted to talk about alignment. Fine, we would talk. But first, I needed to let him dig the hole a little deeper. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to think he had won. I turned to my computer and saw the first email from HR. Subject, urgent, policy updates and signature required. The game was on. The email from Heather in HR was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate violence. It was flagged high importance and contained a 35-page PDF attachment titled Employee Handbook and Compensation Restructuring 2024. The body of the email was sickeningly sweet. Hi, Chris. Just doing some housekeeping to get everyone on the same page with Ryan's exciting new vision. Sign and return by EOD. Thanks. I didn't sign it. I didn't even reply immediately. Instead, I hit print. The heavy-duty laser printer in the hallway hummed to life, churning out the pages. I stood there watching the paper stack up, feeling the eyes of the junior engineers on me. The office atmosphere had shifted overnight. It's amazing how quickly a workplace turns into a high school cafeteria when the alpha decides someone is out. People I had hired, people whose kids' little league games I had attended, were suddenly fascinated by their computer screens. When I walked by, they could smell the blood in the water. I took the warm stack of paper back to my desk, grabbed my red pen, the one I usually reserved for marking up vendor contracts, and started reading. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just housekeeping, it was a demotion disguised as a lateral move. Clause 4.2. Renegotiation of title and responsibilities. Clause 8.1. Revocation of seniority bonuses and executive privileges. And the kicker. Clause 15. At-will termination revision, which essentially stripped senior officers of specific grievance rights if their role was deemed redundant due to technological advancement. Ryan had written this, or rather he had paid some overpriced external consultant to write it, specifically to target me. It was a bear trap painted to look like a welcome mat. I circled the clauses, underlined the contradictions with state labor laws, annotated the margins with case law citations. I spent 3 hours dissecting his vision until the document looked like it had been bleeding. Then I scanned it, saved it to my personal encrypted drive, and shredded the physical copy. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a marked-up draft. I was going to give them silence. At 2:00 p.m., the intercom buzzed. All hands meeting in the fabrication shop, attendance mandatory. I walked down to the shop floor. The air changed as soon as you crossed the threshold from the carpeted offices to the concrete floor. It smelled of metal shavings, cutting oil, and honest work. This was the heart of the company. These were the guys who actually built things. They looked tired. They were leaning against workbenches, arms crossed, wearing safety vests that were stained with grease and welding spatter. Ryan stood on a makeshift stage made of wooden pallets, holding a wireless microphone like he was performing a TED Talk. He had swapped the designer sneakers for pristine work boots that had never seen a day of actual work. "Hey team," he shouted, his voice echoing badly in the cavernous space. "Who's pumped about Q3? Silence. A crane beeped in the distance. I know. Change is tough," he continued, undeterred by the total lack of enthusiasm. "But we are streamlining. We are cutting the dead weight so you guys can move faster. We're introducing a new productivity tracking system that monitors your break times to the second, ensuring maximum efficiency." A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd. Monitoring break times to the second. That wasn't efficiency. That was prison rules. I saw Nick Rodriguez, the shop foreman who had been with us for 18 years, shake his head and spit into a waste bin. Nick used to come to Jennifer's company barbecues. He caught my eye, and for a second, I saw pity. He knew. Then Ryan dropped the hammer. He gestured to a large screen set up behind him. Here is the new organizational chart for the Pittsburgh operation. The chart popped up. It was a colorful web of boxes and lines. At the top, in a giant gold box, was Ryan Matthews, CEO. Below him, a cluster of new titles like VP of Innovation and Director of Digital Transformation. I scanned the chart for my name, VP of Operations. It wasn't there. I looked closer. At the very bottom, in a gray detached box floating in the void, was a title, Legacy Operations Consultant, Interim. The breath left my lungs. He hadn't just fired me, he had publicly ghosted me. He had put my career in a gray box labeled Interim and projected it on a 20-foot screen in front of 150 people. I felt the heat rise up my neck. I could feel the eyes of the shop crew shifting toward me. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. Ryan didn't look at me. He was too busy pointing at the gold box with his name in it. This structure, he chirped, allows for rapid decision-making without getting bogged down in historical bottlenecks. Historical bottleneck. That was me. I didn't storm the stage. I didn't scream. I did something that scared them more. I took out my phone, snapped a high-resolution photo of the screen, and then turned around and walked out. I went straight to the printer room on the executive floor. I needed to see if the digital eraser matched the physical reality. Sure enough, new org charts were already being taped up. My name was gone from the phone directory list pinned to the wall. I walked back to my office and started packing. Not everything, just the personal things. The framed photo of Jennifer and me at the company's 10th anniversary party. A crystal paperweight the welding team gave me for my 10-year anniversary. My ergonomic mouse. Heather from HR appeared in my doorway looking like a deer caught in headlights. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Chris," she squeaked, Did you get my email?" I didn't look up from the box I was filling. "I did, Heather. We really need that signed today. Ryan wants to finalize the payroll transition." I placed a ceramic mug into the box with deliberate care. "I'm sure he does, but I have some concerns about the legality of Clause 15. I'll need my lawyer to review it before I sign anything." Heather paled. "Lawyer? Chris, we're family. We don't need lawyers." I finally looked at her. "Ryan just put me in a gray box titled Interim in front of 150 people, Heather. The family reunion is over. It's just a restructuring," she stammered. "If you don't sign, Ryan might have to take other steps." "Let him," I said, my voice cold. "Tell Ryan to take all the steps he wants." Heather fled. I watched her go, a frantic little messenger running back to the prince. They thought I was packing to leave. They thought I was conceding defeat, but I was just clearing the decks for action. I wasn't moving out. I was digging in. I sat down at my computer. It was time to retrieve the weapon. The next morning, the silence was deafening. My Outlook calendar, usually a colorful Tetris block of vendor meetings and safety reviews, was completely blank. No meetings, no reminders, just white space. I tried to log into the production management system, the software I used to track steel orders and spot delivery issues. The screen blinked. Error 403. Access denied. Contact administrator. They were scrubbing me. This was the digital equivalent of changing the locks while you're still in the house. It was petty, it was amateurish, and it was exactly what I expected from Ryan. He thought that by cutting off my access to the daily operations, he would render me powerless. He thought my power came from being able to see where the trucks were. He was wrong. My power didn't come from the live feed, it came from the foundation. I opened the folder on my local drive labeled Personal Archive. They hadn't locked me out of my own workstation yet, probably because I was too busy figuring out how to install Ryan's new productivity monitoring software. I navigated through a series of nested folders: Legal Documents 2020 COVID Protection Executive Agreements. 2 years ago, when the pandemic hit and supply chains collapsed, a predatory equity firm tried to gut us. They wanted to strip the assets, sell the equipment, and lease back the facilities. Jennifer was already sick then, too weak to fight. The board was in a panic, ready to sell us out for pennies just to save their own golden parachutes. I stepped in. I drafted the poison pill defense. I structured the executive contracts to make firing us so expensive that the acquisition would lose its profitability. To get the board to agree to stay and fight, I had to offer them protection. I wrote new employment agreements for all C-level executives and key specialists that included a severance and equity security clause. It was designed to protect them from the raiders, but I also wrote one for myself. I found the file. C. Matthews Agreement Amended, 2020 Executed. PDF. I opened it. Legal text cascaded onto the screen, dense and comforting. I scrolled to section 12C, Involuntary Termination and Change of Control. The language was precise. I remember typing it at 3:00 a.m., fueled by adrenaline and fear for my wife's legacy. In the event of involuntary termination without documented cause, as defined in Section 9, following a significant restructuring or change in executive leadership, the employee shall be entitled to an immediate transfer of equity equivalent to 10% of the company's total valuation at the time of termination, to be vested immediately. Furthermore, said employee shall retain voting rights on the board of directors for a period of no less than 24 months. At the time, the board signed it because they were terrified of being fired by the raiders. They viewed me as a fixture, as permanent as the building itself. They never imagined a world where they would be the ones firing me. Ryan certainly didn't know it existed. He was too busy picking out furniture for his new office to read the dusty contracts in the legal vault. I checked the digital signature, valid, time-stamped, notarized by the corporate counsel who was currently playing golf in Florida and ignoring Ryan's emails. I saved a copy to my phone. I saved another copy to a USB drive attached to my keychain. I emailed a copy to my personal Gmail account. Then I did something subtle. I went to the company's internal investor portal, which miraculously I still had access to because it was on a separate server from the operations dashboard. I updated my profile. I didn't change any data. I just verified my contact information and linked my personal email as a secondary contact for equity notifications. It was a breadcrumb trail. My office door opened without a knock. It was the IT guy, Nick's nephew named Carlos, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He was holding a laptop. Hey, Chris, Carlos mumbled, staring at his shoes. Hello, Carlos. Here to take my computer? He winced. Ryan, the CEO's office said we need to cycle your hardware. Security updates. They want you to use this loaner for a while. He held out a battered Chromebook that looked like it had been dropped down a flight of stairs. I see, I said, leaning back in my chair. Does this loaner have access to the server? Basic email only. Restricted permissions. I smiled at him. It was a genuine smile this time. Poor Carlos. He was just a pawn. It's okay, Carlos. I understand. I unplugged my high-end workstation, the one with the dual monitors and the processing power to run complex production simulations. I handed it over. Be careful with it. There's a lot of history on that hard drive. Carlos swapped it for the junk laptop and practically ran out of the room. I opened the Chromebook. It took 5 minutes to boot up. The screen was dim, the keyboard sticky. It was an insult, a calculated humiliation designed to make me quit. But I wasn't going to quit. I needed them to fire me. I needed the involuntary termination. If I resigned, Clause 12C was void. If I quit, I got nothing but a pat on the back. I needed Ryan to pull the trigger. I sat there in the silence, staring at the gray Google logo. I was a ghost in the machine now. No access, no power, no voice. Just a man in a corner office waiting for the axe to fall. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Chris, can you come to my office? We need to have that chat, now. This was it. The ghost was about to haunt the house. Ryan's office was a fishbowl, literally. He had replaced the frosted privacy glass with clear floor-to-ceiling panels because he believed in radical transparency, which in practice meant he wanted everyone to see him being important, but couldn't hear anyone screaming for help. I walked in with nothing but my phone and my car keys. No notepad, no pen. I didn't need to take notes. I needed to make history. Ryan was sitting behind a desk that was comically large, a slab of white marble that looked like a sacrificial altar. He didn't stand up when I entered. He gestured vaguely at a low-slung, uncomfortable modernist chair opposite him. "Chris," he said, his voice dripping with that patronizing softness people use on toddlers and the elderly. "Thanks for coming up. Close the door, would you?" I closed the glass door. It didn't block out the sound of the office, just muffled it. I could see the heads of the accounting department turning toward us. We were on display. "How are you holding up?" he asked, tilting his head like a concerned therapist. "I know the org chart changes were abrupt." "I'm fine, Ryan," I said, sitting down and crossing my legs. "I'm just curious about the operational logic." Removing the operations VP in the middle of a contract renewal cycle seems risky. He sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation. "See, that's just it. You're thinking about the weeds. I'm thinking about the ecosystem. We're moving to automated contract management, AI-driven compliance. We just don't need the manual oversight anymore." "AI-driven compliance," I repeated. "So a chatbot is going to negotiate liability caps with the Steelworkers Union?" Ryan's smile tightened. "We're restructuring, Chris. The board supports this. We need to be leaner. And frankly," he leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "I think you're burned out. I think you've been carrying Mom's ghost for too long. It's time for you to go rest. Enjoy the life insurance. Take that trip to Europe you always talked about." The condescension was so thick I could taste it. He was firing me and trying to frame it as a spiritual retreat. "So this is a termination," I stated flatly. "We prefer transition," he corrected, "but my employment is ending involuntarily." "Well, yes, but we've prepared a generous severance package. 2 weeks of pay for every year of service. It's very standard." I kept my face completely neutral. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the trap snapping shut. I needed him to say the words. "Ryan," I said softly, forcing a look of vulnerability, "I just need to know one thing. Is this because of performance? Did I do something wrong? Is there cause for this?" Ryan laughed. It was a light, dismissive sound. "Oh God, no. Chris, you're a workhorse. Everyone knows that. This isn't about cause, it's purely structural. We just want to go in a different direction. We want to keep it classy. No black marks on your record, just a clean break. So the official documentation will state termination without cause," I pressed. "Absolutely," he said, nodding vigorously. "I've already instructed HR, restructuring due to redundancy, no cause. You can collect unemployment, keep your dignity, the whole 9 yards." "I appreciate that," I said. Could you put that in the separation letter just so I have peace of mind?" "It's already in there," he said, sliding a folder across the marble slab. "I have it right here. Just sign the acknowledgement and we can process your check today." I opened the folder. There it was. Notice of separation. Paragraph 1. Employment is terminated effective immediately due to corporate restructuring. Paragraph 2. This termination is not for cause. I looked at the paper. It was the key to the kingdom. "I won't sign the waiver of claims just yet," I said, looking up. "I need to take this home and review it. But I acknowledge receipt of the notice." Ryan rolled his eyes, just a fraction. "Chris, it's standard boilerplate. If you don't sign the waiver, we can't release the severance check." "I understand," I said. "But I acknowledge that I have been terminated. That's effective now, correct?" "Yes, effective immediately. You can hand over your badge to security on the way out." I stood up. I didn't take the pen. I took the folder. "Thank you, Ryan," I said. "You've been very clear." "It's for the best, Chris," he called after me as I reached for the door handle. "You'll see. You're going to be so much happier not worrying about this place." I looked back at him one last time. He was already checking his phone, dismissing me as a problem solved. He looked like a king on a throne, unaware that the floor beneath him had just dissolved. "I think you're right," I said. "I think things are going to be very different now." I walked out into the parking lot, sat in my Ford F-150, and pulled out my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my email app. It was time to drop the bomb. I had already drafted the message 3 days ago, sitting in my drafts folder like a loaded weapon. 2. Board of Directors, Corporate Secretary, General Counsel. CC, Ryan Matthews. Subject: Notice of Severance Clause Activation, Equity Transfer Section 12C. I attached the PDF of my 2020 employment agreement. I attached the photo of today's separation notice. I typed the final body. Dear board members and council, as of 3:30 p.m. today, I have been involuntarily terminated from my position as VP of Operations without cause, as documented in the attached notice of separation signed by CEO Ryan Matthews. Pursuant to Section 12C of my employment agreement, attached, executed March 15, 2020, this termination immediately triggers the vesting and equity transfer clause. Please consider this formal notice that I am exercising my right to the immediate transfer of a 10% equity stake in Matthews Steel and Fabrication based on the most recent valuation. Furthermore, per the agreement, I am immediately assuming my position as a voting shareholder on the board of directors. Please have the updated capitalization table and share certificates prepared within 48 hours as stipulated by the contract. Regards, Chris Matthews, shareholder. I pressed send. The little whoosh sound was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It took exactly 12 minutes for my phone to ring. Patrick Williams, the chairman of the board, sounded like he was having a heart attack. Chris, his voice was shaky. Is this real? Hello, Patrick, I said, taking a sip of coffee from the diner I'd driven to. Very real. You signed it yourself during the COVID crisis. I remember protecting the C-suite. I didn't realize you wrote one for yourself. I was acting COO at the time, Patrick. I wasn't going to leave myself out in the cold. I could hear shouting in the background. Does Ryan know? He was CC'd. But knowing Ryan, he probably hasn't checked his email since he fired me. Chris, 10%. That's a controlling block when combined with the employee stock plan. That gives you significant leverage. It gives me a seat at the table, Patrick. A permanent one. By 7:00 p.m., I had a formal letter from General Counsel Andy Thompson acknowledging the validity of my claim. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. the next morning. They had folded. The contract was airtight. The Zoom meeting the next morning was beautiful. 7 squares on my laptop screen, and I was holding all the cards. Ryan looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red. When he saw me on screen, his mouth fell open. This is blackmail, he spat immediately. This is fraudulent inducement. I didn't hide anything, Ryan, I replied calmly. It was in the standard executive protection package. You just didn't read it. Patrick rubbed his temples. We have a motion on the table. Any shareholder holding more than 5% may call for a leadership review. Chris has formally requested a vote of no confidence regarding the CEO. You can't do this, Ryan whispered. I am the family. You're a liability, I said softly. You triggered a massive equity dilution because you were careless. That's breach of fiduciary duty. Andy Thompson, the general counsel, cleared his throat. We also discovered some expense irregularities. Consulting fees paid to a company registered to Ryan's college roommate. Personal meals charged as client entertainment. Ryan's face went white. Those were legitimate business expenses. A $400 dinner at a steakhouse in Vegas while you were supposedly visiting a client in Pittsburgh? Andy continued. That's fraud, Ryan. The vote was swift, all hands raised except Ryan's. Patrick's voice was heavy. Motion carries. Ryan Matthews is hereby removed as CEO, effective immediately. Ryan started to protest, but Patrick cut him off. Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be shipped. The screen went black where Ryan had been. Now, I said to the remaining faces, let's talk about that productivity tracking app. It's garbage, and we're killing it today. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the same conference room where this all started, but now I'm at the head of the table. The quarterly numbers are up 18%. The brake monitoring system is dead and buried. The welders got their raise. Nick Rodriguez is back to running the shop floor the way it should be run. Ryan tried to sue for wrongful termination. His lawyer took one look at the expense reports and the employment contract, then advised him to find a new career. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Tampa. I kept Jennifer's portrait in the lobby, right where it belongs. The company is stronger now. The employees trust the leadership again, and every morning when I walk through that shop floor, I hear the sound of honest work being done by people who know their jobs are secure. Sometimes the old dog knows a few tricks the puppies haven't learned yet. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and smart enough, the trapdoor you built years ago saves everything you've worked for. The best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. And I got 10% of everything.